Peter. So as I said, I spoke with Dead Prez last night, and we talked about the almost decade now that it's been since the uprising on campus. Now we have more unrest on campus, and I think that a lot of people don't really understand exactly what's going on. And as a faculty member and somebody who is involved, I was hoping that you could walk us through some of it.
Okay, so very briefly, I don't think what's been going on in the last week is totally separate from the 2007-2008 movement. So 2007, late 2007, there was a really major movement called port militarization resistance, where people for about 9 days really prevented some of the striker vehicles from leaving. And then there was a lot of police brutality, not in terms of like shooting people, but definitely in terms of beating people, a lot of gas and so on, which then I think was part of the context for 2008, the Dead Prez, and then including the racial profiling of this guy who was arrested, who I think was not the right person. I know a lot of the people who were involved.
Right.
And so the issue of police racism, there's definitely a history back to 2008 and a very critical view toward the police. And exposing some of the racism on both, quote, liberal Olympia and liberal Evergreen.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward now to 2015 to 17, and there's been some increase in diversity in Evergreen. At least that's my experience. Like the class I'm teaching this quarter is 29 students, and 14 are people of color, which is for Evergreen a very high number.
Yeah.
And it's still kind of, white is very much normalized at Evergreen in terms of classes. Black students are still underrepresented both among teachers and faculty, and part of the context for what's been happening the last few weeks is there were two different incidences. One was where there was some disruption of a new police chief was being put in, and there were some students disrupted, but the only ones.
Can I just say, so that was a new police chief on campus?
On campus.
Yeah,
on
not,
campus,
yeah, so not,
right.
yeah. Got it.
Right, that's good, yeah. And when they had kind of, and I think she's not as bad as some of the ones, but she's still the police chief. So when they had this thing of like her, like kind of celebration, there was some disruption of it, and the two people who were calling from the student disciplinary code were two black trans students, and there were many, many white students whom I know were very involved in it also, and they were in charge. So that created a little bit of a movement, not a huge one. Then this, I believe, then there's a whole incident with the day of absence, day of presence. Should I go over that quickly?
Yeah.
So basically...
Well, actually, the one thing that I think that it would be helpful if you could explain is because as when we were talking a week or two ago, that the perception that people have that students and faculty that were white were told to leave campus is not true. And if you could just explain.
Okay, so that's really important. So Evergreen has a tradition, almost as long as I've been here almost 30 years, but certainly I'd say 20, where you have this day of absence, day of presence. And it's basically 2 days where issues, particularly of racial oppression, are kind of at least discussed with. And I think discussion's good. It hasn't led to as many structural changes I would like. There's a lot of discussion. And historically, on the day of absence, the students of color, staff and faculty go off campus. There's a place, they usually have some kind of meeting where they discuss issues, have speakers, and then there's events for primarily white students on campus that same day, day of absence, even though, again, nobody has to go off. I mean, I know, like, I've given a lot of talks today of presence on campus. They've often been like black students, Latinos, so everything is always totally voluntary. This year, the organizers thought that, let's reverse it, we'll ask white students to go off campus, and the organized activities on campus would be for black, Latino, Native, Asian American students, etc. And Evergreen rented the Unitarian Church, which is very nearby, which has a capacity of 200. Evergreen has like 4,500 students, probably 3,500 are white. So you had to sign up. nobody was asked to go. You had to sign up on a sheet before because they had buses going for up to 200 people. So talking about up to 200 staff, faculty, and students were asked to go off campus. Brett Weinstein, who's a professor in evolutionary biology, who I think is a good teacher for most students whom I've talked to, he took great offense to this on this list called All Faculty Staff. It's a listserv for staff and faculty at Evergreen, and just said they were being coerced to go off campus, and he totally reacted against that. And then also, at the same time, they're having more discussion about racism, diversity, and equality, and there was this Equity Diversity Committee, and it was set up by the president. And it was somewhat top-down, so he criticized both that it was top-down, but also saying this was unnecessary. So those were two very connected incidents, okay? So that's, I think, really important for this dialogue, that the white students were forced to go off campus with staff. It was totally voluntary, and it was just an idea for more equality, because it's been, every single other year, it's been the other way around. And so that became a pretty major issue. Then another issue, which isn't directly tied to him, but more tied to the police and racism on campus. There was a closed Facebook event that was, I think it was either called, I think Trump 2020, I actually didn't see it, I got emails about it, that basically was very, very anti-black. Now some of the
campus
closed, but it was on Facebook. It was a closed Facebook list on campus, all of students.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And then again, two African American students who got a hold of it, they challenged totally verbally, like in the cafeteria, some of the people on it. It wasn't all white, by the way, it was all non-blacks. That's what you're talking about, anti-black racism. They were challenged, as far as I know, from what they've told me, other people, there were no physical threats at all. But then they were told to report to the the Evergreen police station, and basically said they couldn't leave for 2 hours. None of the students who wrote stuff was very overtly racist, and were anti-black, I should say. None of them were called. The two black students were asked to move, not to talk to anybody on the list, and so on. So that was another incident. And then coming up to the present, 2 weeks ago, I think, that was maybe the Tuesday, people went into Brett Weinstein class about 9 in the morning, maybe 50 people. I actually got there by the quarter, and I had a class next door, so I saw people outside. And of the 50, it was probably majority people of color, the largest group being black, but also many white students too. They challenged him really strongly, and did say he should resign. They didn't, that he was held hostage is a total lie. There was a door he could leave. I'm not sure. I was told by students that he called both the Olympia police and the Evergreen police. It may have been a student, so I'm not sure. And he may have asked a student to do it, so I'm still not sure exactly of that.
I had heard it was a student, but again, I mean, the information has been so
definitely
sporadic. So
I think it's very possible it was a student that he asked to do it. That seemed, because I've heard these different variations, and then both the Olympia police, which passions were very inflamed against, because May 2013, 2 years ago, no, excuse me, May 21st, 2015, these two young African-American brothers, Bryson Chaplin and Andre Thompson, they'd lived in Olympia maybe a little bit over a year. They're skateboarders, they had shoplifted 2 6-packs of beer from a Safeway in the west side of Olympia, and the clerk caught them. They dropped the beer. She later says they assaulted them, but they dropped the beer and they took off. They took off, and about a mile from Safeway, a cop who, my guess, a lot of PTSD. He had been definitely in Iraq, maybe in Afghanistan. There's different reports of that. Maybe Border Patrol. He saw them. His claim was, he's white cop. These guys, African American guys. He claimed they threatened him with a skateboard, but he was really so scared. There was all sorts of cops looking for them too, because it became a big thing in a safe way. He shot them by his car. They went into the woods. He tried to go in after they came back out, still by himself, playing this big hero. And then they came out, and again, he claimed that one of them had a skateboard, was going to hit him with it. He shot both of them. One of them, Andre, is still paralyzed. And the whole case, was like the perfect alibi. Like he said, nobody else saw it, that they didn't actually hit him. So there's no DNA, nothing on the skateboard. He has no marks whatsoever. And this incredible miscarriage of justice, he was totally exonerated. And then assault charges were charged against both of them, and a shoplifting charge. And they got convicted, I don't remember the exact date, but sort of just before the big incident, but maybe a week earlier, kind of mid-May, they got convicted on these assault charges. And so it just, if you step back, it's just so incredible. The people who were shot were charged. The cop who had no marks, no injuries, he was the one who got off. And so this is, it's been a really, really big issue. We've had a lot of marches in Olympia about it. And very similar to things at Evergreen, there's this whole view. I remember some arguments I've had with people I know that sort of, Olympia is different. Police shootings happen other places, but non-Olympia
Right.
races. So, I always say to people, I wrote this in an article for Counterpunch, I'm sure you can find it. Yeah, I was saying every place always says they're different whenever there's a police shooting, too. And Olympia is part of the United States, and so is Evergreen.
Right.
Even though, I think they're both certainly more liberal than the country as a whole. And so anyway, they went into his class. So this is maybe a week before, maybe it could have been 10 days before the conviction. They're going to be sentenced in June, Andre and Bryson. And, many of the people who were involved in the movement around the racism on campus, they've also been involved in going to trial, supporting Andre and Bryson, too, who both come on campus a lot also.
So there's a lot of solidarity
A lot
there.
of solidarity. Yeah, I visited, I know both of them reasonably well and so on, too. And the mom's been very, very active also, kind of Black Lives Matter stuff. So anyway, people went to his classroom. He left. One of the Evergreen cops just pushed people aside and also really angered people because there's no racism on campus. And that's the interesting thing is I think both the Professor Weinstein, the faculty, we didn't use the word professor, I mean the faculty member Weinstein, and also the cop Odell, it's kind of this view of a colorblind society, and racism to them is like the Ku Klux Klan. But like, for example, Weinstein was also saying to students that day and afterwards, basically there's only one human race, there's no phenotype, it doesn't matter. And it's true biologically there's one human race, he's a biologist, but I think what's totally missing is socially, race is still very, very important. So I think missing that too. And he was pretty, arrogant toward the students who went in. And then later that day, it was that same day, I believe the 23rd, it was really an impressive meeting where close to 600 people, I'm not sure the number, definitely over 500, less than 700, met in a big room with Evergreen. The president tried to control it, but students of culturally black students kind of organized the meeting. And for me, I said, Evergreen's a very white school. There are probably at least 80 African Americans there, which for Evergreen, you hardly ever see that, at least at the Olympia campus.
That's like a majority for Evergreen. Yeah, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because most of the African American students are at Tacoma campus. It's a small campus in Tacoma. So anyway, it's just really strong. And again, Weinstein claimed he was afraid and threatened. He came to that meeting. He didn't say anything. So if he was really feeling so afraid, he was at a meeting. Nobody touched him. Nobody threatened him, and so on too. So that meeting went on. The next day, Wednesday, there was a sit-in at the president's office. Again, hundreds of people sitting all over, a lot of good discussion going on, very much led by black and other students of color. And to me, that's so important, of really both nationally and locally, Evergreen, of like sort of black students taking the lead, finding their voice, really gaining power in terms of building organization and so on. So that was really, really significant. And then a series of demands, like 12 demands emerged. And they actually don't call for Weinstein's firing. That's
I must have misinterpreted when I was like, they ask him to resign?
They asked him to resign. The demand call, and I'm not for being fired either. Like the thing I wrote that was on Counterpunch and Z, I said that sadly to me, I think he's very clueless about race, but he's probably no more racist than the majority of white faculty around the country.
I actually thought when I was reading that, I thought that was a really powerful statement that you put in there, because it really just like
But sad.
it's sad, but
Yeah.
but it made the point
Yeah.
that this is a much more
Yeah, and I think to me the issue, it's a hard thing talking about this because nationally the whole focus him. To me, the movement is much more than about him. Like that's the 11th demand out of 12. There's demands about disarming the campus police, which I think is really important. If somebody's not going to get shot on campus, it would make the police and students much more equal. There's a lot of demands about more training around racism for staff, faculty, students, and a lot of demands deal with that. There's a demand which I think is really good about setting up a person who works with undocumented immigrants and also helping with scholarships because most of the scholarships, either state or national, undocumented immigrants can't get.
right.
And there is a growing number in Washington National, plus the whole, attack of undocumented. So the demands on that, there's demands about setting up a center around LGBT. So it's dealing with race, but also connected issues too. So I find it a very, very significant movement. And the schools responded so far by, they're going to put a lot of resources to have these studies set up. We'll see what happens. I'm a little bit skeptical, but
Well, I mean, it sounded like, and again, I mean, I do need to stress that even though I went to Evergreen, I hadn't been there for a long time,
Right.
but it did seem from the outside looking in that at least the president was saying a lot of the right things
Yeah.
when he was talking with the students. Now, whether that translates into actual action or not is a separate question.
right. And I think that's fair.
But yeah,
It's interesting though because he used to teach at UW, University of Washington, before he became president at Whitman College in Eastern Washington.
Okay.
And a lot of his, research was dealing with kind of racial disparities in the whole criminal justice system. Pretty good work. I've looked at a lot of it, but it was a long time ago. And as we know, theory and practice often vary a lot from people too. So he hasn't been totally hostile. And, I'm worried because nationally, the attacks on Evergreen as this place that's totally out of control, reverse racism, which to me is a racist concept to begin with, is so dominant. I've been not surprised, but how many friends of mine know? I've lived in many places. I've friends all over the country, and also even from Olympia and Seattle, but more from out of state, have asked me what's going on in Evergreen. I've kind of assumed the right-wing narrative, and then a lot of them have thanked me when I gave them the other narrative. People are really major activists in the country too. So I think it's really important we have another narrative. So, but because we haven't, Bridges is under a lot of pressure to really crack down, and he hasn't. So, for example, he did say the first day that the students who went into the classroom and then challenged very strongly to Weinstein, they were not going to be disciplined. So I thought that was good. There's a lot of discussion too about making the student codes be more racially just and so on. Just to quickly bring that up to the present. So I had, like I said, I thought Weinstein was clueless on race, not a bad person. He was kind of active in Occupy. We talked a lot then. Definitely saw himself as progressive. But then on Friday of that week, 2 days after the big sit-in on the 26th of May.
26th, yeah.
Yeah, he went on Fox News and Tucker Carlson. I don't know if you've seen the interview.
I've seen the interview.
Yeah.
I mean, well, in segments, I'll be honest, watching Tucker is very difficult for me, so I have to watch one little bit at a time.
So that speaks well of you. I mean, I can't stand him, but I know, and I definitely I remember when he took over O'Reilly, my kids all said, who do watch him just to get angry, they said he's the same as O'Reilly.
Oh, yeah.
And he's really had this whole thing about, reverse racism on campus, free speech is being violated by, leftists, people of color, and so on. And I just thought I lost all sympathy for Weinstein after that. I mean, the whole idea that he either didn't challenge or went along with Carlson's kind of narrative. I remember on the show he compared it to Phnom Penh and Pol Pot in Cambodia in 1970. Kind of black supremacy, which is a term that Weinstein's used, which is so incredibly off. I
Yeah.
guess I think a lot of racism today demands racial equality by immigrants, black, Native American. They're seen as reverse vets because they don't understand the racism to begin with. And to me, their demands for
There's no historical context to this. Yeah. So if you, and just to move us a little bit, but at the same time, or not at the same time, when Weinstein gave that interview, there was also the attack in Portland.
right.
And so then and then that was because of quote unquote free speech,
Right.
and then on Thursday campus was shut down from a similar. And were you on campus on
Okay,
Thursday?
so I'll bring that up, even though you may have.
Sure, sure.
So, so he's on the show, right, the same day. There's a history of white supremacist groups in both Portland and Seattle. Like, what year did you leave the area?
Oh, I left in 2010, but
Yeah.
when I worked with the nonprofit that I worked with before I started going to Evergreen, we did a lot of security work and anti-fascism work when the neo-Nazis came to town in 2006.
Right. So in 2006, I don't know if you know, I had how many incredible amount of death threats, like really a lot, and probably 10 phone calls, other stuff too, and I was really targeted. Even the Justice Department, who I don't trust, they called me and said, oh, they heard a lot because those groups infiltrated about discussion of killing me. I was very aware. My house is pretty much an armed camp because one night we heard they come to the house, so I'm really aware of that. But the point is, insofar as we did intelligence, the people in the group I was most worried about were from Portland. Two of the main people, and there were a lot from Seattle. There was at most one person from Olympia it's called National Socialist Movement. A lot of them ended up in prison for threatening Obama afterwards. Right, so that, yes, I'm pretty aware of those groups. I've always tried to be pretty, and plus I've had a lot of other problems, right-wing groups. So anyway, the thing happened in Portland. To me, those people are just so courageous. I have so much solidarity with people who, they don't play the lines kind of assigned to them society. The three whites who try to protect the two young women, two paid with their life and one was injured. So that happened right that same time. Then on, I can't remember the name of it, it's a right-wing, Dory Munson, I think his name, a right-wing radio show.
Yeah.
That was either Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, right? Getting close to the present now, like 5 days ago. One of the people from the Patriots, something like the group that the guy identified with, they were supposed to have today, I don't know if it came on, a free speech rally in Portland.
Yeah, they're going to. I think, that's going to be.
But in the
be following
interview,
that.
he mentioned about also coming to Evergreen because of the whites under attack there. So that was Wednesday. And then Thursday morning, 11:45, almost noon, the call to Evergreen of somebody, said I think has automatic weapons. I did hear it, and it was go after the commie scum in both Olympia and Evergreen. So Evergreen closed down right away, and they've been closed since. I'm not sure.
They reopen on Saturday, I think.
Okay, when I looked, they definitely were closed Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
They did reopen Saturday, I thought, but last I should say they're probably going to open Monday, but they opened Saturday, So, but anyway, they were closed for almost 2 days. And out of fear, again, I think it's as much the fear about, being sued and stuff like that. But anyway, so it's a very, very tense situation again with Weinstein. He also had really, I thought, ridiculous, and to me, supporting racism, furthering the Trump agenda. Whether I don't think that's his goal, but I think that's what's happening. He had an editorial on the 30th, on Tuesday, I believe, was last week. No, this week, 5 days ago, in the Wall Street Journal, that you might want to look at.
Oh yeah, I'll check that out.
Too, that basically again.
That he wrote.
That he wrote.
Yeah.
They printed it though, and it was really intensely, I thought, furthering this right-wing agenda in what's going on too.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a kind of a very brief history.
No, that's
brief-
great. That's
okay.
great. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Peter. I really appreciate it.